Severe is COVID-19. As recent pandemics and indeed historic pandemics go, we're finally able to get a sense of that by looking at 2020 and mortality data compared with previous years. It's a probably depressing task, but nonetheless something we have to do just to get a sense of whether this is just like a normal flu season or something else entirely. And this line here shows you the total number of people who have died in England and Wales in each of the years, going all the way back to the 1840s. And over that period, of course, there were many incidents where you had high mortality. So the potato blight of the 1840s, potato famine in Ireland, but it also affected much of Europe. The Great Freeze of 1895, high levels of mortality there. World War I and II. And in those post-war years, you had various flu epidemics, for instance, 1951, and indeed Hong Kong flu of 1968. Some people wondering whether this would be worse or indeed better than those post-war pandemics. We can have a look at it now that we have some of the data through. So this is 2020 data, and this is what it shows you. You can see the line goes up. How much higher is it than previous years? Well, if you draw a line just seeing that, it goes actually all the way back to 1918. Over 600,000 deaths. First time that's happened since 1918. We're talking here about civilian deaths, I should say. If you're including military deaths, it's significantly higher in the world wars. But that's the thing really to look at here. It's a very high number, but as you've probably worked out, we haven't adjusted for population here. So if we really want to compare with previous years, there's a different way that we look at the numbers. We do it deaths per per thousand rather of the population. And here it's a slightly different picture. You can see it's going down and down and down. Continuous mortality improvements over the years until you get to 2020, where you can see that line going up. So more deaths in 2020. And if you draw a line there, it's about 10 per thousand. It only goes back to 2003, but the key thing here is to compare it with the previous years, because you can see mortality improving and then suddenly deteriorating. How much of a deterioration? Well, we can get a sense of that because we've got the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries to look at the numbers, age adjust them, population adjust them, and here's what they show. Anything above the line here is improving mortality. Anything below the line is deteriorating. And what you can see is for much of the past century, there's been more improvements than deteriorations until we get to 2020. Here's COVID-19. There you can see an enormous fall. In fact, we're talking about a fall of about 13%. And if we follow that line back, the last time there was anything similar was 1929. Now, bear in mind, we only have 1 year's worth of death data, so we're only midway through potentially this pandemic. There could be more deaths to come, unfortunately. This doesn't adjust for the fact that we had lockdowns which could have saved many deaths. Even so, this underlines that this has been a pandemic that is of historic proportions.